DNA of greatness, free from poverty, mental slavery, corruption, and backwardness. The Nigeria Rebirth Project, the beginning of a super nation, with the fatherly blessing and support of His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Federal Republic of Nigeria. Join the mother of the nation, Her Excellency Mrs. Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, wife of the President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, and Grand Patron Nigeria Rebirth Project, at the official unveiling and flag-off of Nigeria Rebirth Project on Thursday 17th March, 5 p.m. at the Presidential Banquet Hall, Aso Villa, Abuja. Special feature will include the unveiling of the biggest unity art piece in Africa, the Rebirth artwork. And for the first time ever, the presentation of the prestigious Nigeria Rebirth Ambassadorial Award to Nigerian children. Special guests include His Excellency Professor Yemi Oshibajo, Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, and his wife, past head of states, presidents, and their families, honorable ministers, Federal Republic of Nigeria, members of the 8th National Assembly, governors of the 36 states, FCT minister, and their wives, diplomats, and other stakeholders. The Nigeria Rebirth Project. The baby is coming with a new national DNA of greatness. Nothing can stop her. Announcer, Comrade Isaac Balami, Project Coordinator.
Gas pipelines are the arteries for powering electricity. When the artery is burst, then the entire system collapses. Vandalizing gas pipelines is a criminal offense against the Nigerian people. Let us join hands and protect our gas pipelines from the enemies of Nigeria. Report any suspected vandal to the security operatives. Let us stop vandals before they destroy our collective national heritage, so we can have the Nigeria of our dreams, where there will be light at all times. This message.
Nigeria and South Africa resolved to work closely towards deepening strategic bilateral and multilateral engagement between the two countries.
Federal government and Switzerland agree on repatriation of $321 million looted funds.
Nigerian Army Chief of Training and Operations, Major General Yushau Mahmoud Abubakar, dies in a car crash.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is on incessant clashes between herdsmen and farmers, causes and solutions.
February 9 this year, in the community of Abi in Uzowani, local government area of Enugu State. Wow, it was as if hell was let loose in the quiet agrarian community when assailants suspected to be herdsmen invaded the enclave, leaving blood and agony in their trail. Unconfirmed reports have it that over 150 people were brutally murdered, many more injured, houses were torched, and farm produce worth millions of naira destroyed. Abi, of course, have never been the same again since that moment.
Well, only recently, Blessing, suspected herdsmen were said to have brutally attacked a village in Agatu area of Benue State. Now, the State Police Command said over 5,000 cows, accompanied by the armed herdsmen, occupied part of Agatu local government area, where about 300 lives were also reportedly lost and some 7,000 persons displaced.
You're right, Kingsley. The conflict between herdsmen and farming communities in the central and southern states of Nigeria is as old, well, of course, it's an age-long problem, but it has escalated in this last decade and has assumed a very deadly dimension.
Well, cost considerations, particularly the desire to fatten their herd close to their markets, constitute a major reason why the herdsmen now graze large proportions of their cattle in the central and southern parts of Nigeria. Now, the Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, in a recent report submitted that pastoralism persists because it is far cheaper than sedentary breeding of livestock.
Well, also the challenges of climate change. Kingsley, you know, of course, with a recent call for other things to actually take a look at climate activities. Well, for land acquisition by capitalist farmers, as well as other reasons, the need herders, of course, that is herders, of course, have moved southwards in search of grazing lands, and consequently, why they often come in conflict with farming communities, really.
You're right. Now, conflicts usually occur when the herders move into cultivated areas with their cattle. Now, this usually leads to the destruction of crops and provoking the victims, of course, to acts of resistance, either by preventing entry into their farms or killing or otherwise stealing the cattle or poisoning the feeds. In response, the herders also wage deadly attacks on farming communities.
Well, many say these conflicts have assumed a frightening dimension, actually requiring urgent attention before they escalate into full-blown war. Well, this prompted President Muhammadu Buhari recently to direct this setting up of a panel of investigation into the incessant herdsmen's attack on villagers, and also to find out the root causes and likely solution to be proffered.
Well, on this part, the Nigerian Senate, while debating a motion moved by Senator Chukwuma Utaze in reaction to the massacre of inhabitants of communities in Agatu, a local government area, called for the establishment of ranches and grazing reserves across the country as a means to ending the recurring deadly conflicts between the nomadic herdsmen and the inhabitants of the farming communities.
Well, the clashes are also sometimes explained as religious, but of late, observers have noted that the conflict have recently been infused with politics, legal issues, of course, the religion and that of ethnicity. To some others, however, it is a conflict basically about resource use.
Well, what are the immediate and remote causes of these bloody clashes between the herdsmen and farmers? Some of them, of course, we have already ticked off. Now, who are those behind the wanton killings, and why have the killings continued unabated? These and other questions we shall seek answers to, of course, together with the solutions to the problems that, as Blessing indicated, might snowball, according to some observers, if not tackled at this time. That's what we are taking a look at in today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Blessing Abu. I join Kingsley in welcoming you to today's edition of the program, coming to you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. In the course of the program, we shall bring to you our companion segments, which will, of course, include our newspaper review, business packages, sports, foreign, and entertainment. Right now, we're kicking off with the news, and here's Lydia Bassi as our guide. Good morning, Lydia.
Thank you, Blessing. Good morning, and welcome to the news. Nigeria and the Republic of South Africa have resolved to work more closely together towards deepening the strategic bilateral and multilateral agreements between the two countries. Consequently, the nearly 30 dormant agreements and MOUs already signed between the two countries over the years are to be revitalized and invigorated to enhance socio-economic benefits. This was part of the decisions reached at the end of the bilateral talks between President Muhammadu Buhari and his visiting South African counterpart, Jacob Zuma.
Make them much more relevant by meeting at the highest level at least once a year and going over what our council, respective council of ministers have been able to achieve. Through you, the press, we would like you to promote those positive aspects that bind us together, politically, economically, and security-wise.
We have directed the relevant ministers to move with speed in implementing all signed agreements. We have also directed our ministers to identify joint projects in the key high-impact strategic development areas, which will have socio-economic benefits such as employment creation to our peoples.
Meanwhile, the president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, says South Africa and Nigeria must unite to achieve socio-economic development in Africa. He was addressing a joint session of Nigeria's National Assembly.
For rules-based international system and must unite and work together in this regard in order to achieve a more just and equal world.
It is a testament of our collective aspiration and recognition that we must come together, act together, and grow together to forge a new African reawakening, built on our people, democracy, and the rule of law.
As representatives of the people, seek that this brotherhood between our leaders translates to good relations between citizens of both countries, and it is only then, and only then, that both countries can speak to true integration of our peoples in the interests of our continent.
Now to other matters. Majority of participants at a one-day public hearing on the Frivolous Petitions Bill 2015, organized by the Senate Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters, has called on the National Assembly to discard the bill. They say the passage of the bill will undermine the anti-corruption fight of the present administration.
The process leading to its passage must be all-inclusive. The committee is mindful of the divergent views and commentaries expressed on this bill in the social media and other traditional media.
The fact that the bill wishes to curb excesses, it is not a reason to mean that it should serve the purpose of denial of access to information, nor is it meant to do away with checks on the executive, legislature, and the judiciary.
Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has appealed to the Voice of America, VOA, to be more objective in its coverage of the war on insurgency in the northeastern part of the country. The minister's appeal came on the heels of media reports of unfavorable media practice by the VOA in the fight against Boko Haram.
From the same part, and I think largely is from the perception. People have not been too glad or too happy about the way the insurgency has been reported in recent times. I don't know whether if you look at the back page of the trust. Yeah.
Nigeria may soon be in possession of $321 million looted funds as the federal government and the Swiss government have signed an agreement to that effect. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, who says there is no hiding place for looters, promised that the money, when released, will be used for the benefit of Nigerians.
I'm confident that we can work together in order to make an important step in fighting corruption. The fight against corruption is a priority of our government, and it is important to work together in order to restitute the money that has been stolen to the population.
This government is off and doing as far as the repatriation of looted funds wherever they are located, wherever they are situated in the globe is concerned. The government has a desired commitment, has a desired political will, has a desired cooperation, and has put in place a desired roadmap for the recovery of the looted funds wherever they are located.
Meanwhile, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo says the memory of the late Minister of State, Labor and Employment, James Ocholi, will live in the minds of all Nigerians. He said this when he paid a condolence visit to the family of the late minister in Abuja.
Country, how very, very deeply sorry we are. And we pray that you all will find solace in Jesus Christ, and that you will do much better than your parents ever did.
We are not hopeless. We are mourning, but we are not hopeless. And we are most proud of him, even now in death. We know the man who he was. And we only pray that God will give us the grace to be who he also taught us to be.
Still on a sad note, the Nigerian Army Chief of Training and Operations, Major General Yusha'u Muhammad Abubakar, is dead. He died in a road accident along Maiduguri-Damaturu Road. The acting general officer commanding 3 divisions, Brigadier General Aliyu, who was traveling with him, sustained some injuries, and he is responding to treatment. Late Major General Yusha'u, until his last appointment, was former theater commander, Operation Lafia Dole, in the Northeast. President Muhammadu Buhari has reaffirmed the commitment of this administration to the promotion of the well-being and rights of women in all geopolitical zones of the country. Consequently, he has directed the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs to quickly identify critical issues militating against the well-being and progress of Nigerian women with a view to rapidly devising adequate programs and strategies to address them. In a message to commemorate this year's International Women's Day, President Buhari noted that this year's theme, Pledge for Parity, is consistent with the promise by the All Progressive Congress, APC, to remove all impediments to the realization of equality by Nigerian women. The statement from the Senior Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, says the President assured all women that his administration will continue to do all within its powers to fulfill the pledge, the APC pledge. The wife of the President, Mrs. Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, has advocated massive campaign at all levels to draw attention to the plight of women, particularly in the areas of health, education, and other sectors of development. This is contained in a statement signed by her Senior Special Assistant, Dr. Hajo Sani, in commemoration of Women's Day. The wife of the President further said, this year's celebration provides another opportunity to reflect on the condition of women with a view to improving their lives. Meanwhile, in commemoration of the day, the wife of the President has paid a visit to Aluma Orphanage at Wuse, Abuja. The police in Yenagoa, Bayelsa State, have filed charges against Inusa Dahiru, the alleged abductor of 14-year-old Ese Oruru, at the Federal High Court, Yenagoa. The 5-count charge is preferred against the accused before Justice Nganjiwe. The National Boundary Commission has denied media reports credited to a member of the Akwa Ibom State House of Assembly that Cameroon has annexed 16 villages in Akwa Ibom State. In a statement, the Commission spokesman Kabir Issa Bala says Nigeria has already accepted with good faith the judgment delivered by the International Court of Justice on the 10th of October 2002 concerning the land and maritime boundary disputes between Nigeria and Cameroon. It adds that the Commission therefore calls on members of the public and Nigerians to disregard the content of the said publication, and that the international boundary as arbitrated by the International Court of Justice, ICJ, is well respected by both Nigeria and Cameroon. And that's the news for now. It's back to Blessing and Kingsley.
All right, thank you very much, dear Lady Abasi, for the news on Good Morning Nigeria. We'll now take a short break where we return. It will be time for our business segment.
You hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter. That might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words. Run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Are you an administrative officer in a television or radio station? Are you interested in sharpening your skills in record keeping, report writing, conflict management, and administrative law? Here is your opportunity to be counted amongst the best administrators in your workplace. The NTA Television College JAWS is organizing a 2-week short course for media administrators and other interested members of the public. Date, 14 to 28 March 2016. Course fee, 40,000 Naira per participant, including accommodation. Come avail yourself with modern-day techniques of administrative principles. For further inquiries, please contact the course coordinator on 070-390-38132. Announcer, Management.
To keep my family healthy, I take time to make everything look clean.
Yes, but is it really clean? Let me show you. This is why 80% of hygiene-related illnesses are acquired at home. Some cleaners don't kill germs, others kill germs, but don't clean properly. The new Dettol Multi-Surface Cleaner. 10 times better germ kill, 10 times better cleaning, and all-day freshness. 10 times better cleaning and germ kill for a healthy home.
Dettol, endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association.
Buy the new Dettol 55-gram soap for 80 Naira only. Keep your family protected from germs.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. Next time for our business packet. Motorists in Abuja call for concerted effort at addressing fuel scarcity as queues reduce. Plus, experts express worry that climate change may affect crop yields in sub-Saharan Africa. Details of these and more with Leah Katung-Babatunde.
On business news this morning, fuel queues have begun to disappear in Abuja, the nation's capital, as supply increases. The motorists who spoke with NTA Business News say authorities should devise a means of making petrol supply unhindered in the country.
I just pray the federal government should do something about it. The Minister of Petroleum should do something about this fuel issue so that Nigerians will get fuel to do our normal duties.
They advised that government should make the refineries operational to address most of the energy-related crises facing the economy. Without action to help farmers adjust to changing climate conditions, it will become impossible to grow some staple food crops in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, with maize, beans and bananas most at risk. Researchers in a study of how global warming will affect 9 crops that make up half the region's food production found that up to 30% of areas growing maize and bananas and up to 60% of those producing beans could become unviable by the end of the century. Julian Ramirez Villegas, the study's lead author who works with the CGIAR research program on climate change, said agriculture and food security in 6 of the 9 crops, cassava, groundnut, pearl, millet, finger, millet, sorghum, yam, are projected to remain stable under moderate and extreme climate change scenarios. The study warns that around 40% of maize-growing areas will require transformation, which could mean changing the type of crop grown or, in extreme cases, even abandoning crop farming. Sorghum and millet, which have higher tolerance to drought and heat, could replace maize in most places on the earth. And despite some modest gains in some regions in the world, millions of women are losing ground in the quest for equality in the world of work. This is according to a new report prepared by the International Labour Organization, ILO, as part of the ILO's Women at Work Centenary Initiative. ILO published a new report on the occasion of the International Women's Day, 8th March, titled Women at Work Trends 2016, which examines data for up to 178 countries and concludes that inequality between women and men persists across a wide spectrum of the global labor market.
What does this mean? This means they often have lower remuneration, lower access to skills and skills training, less of an access to social protection that many of us take advantage of, and also in terms of pension. Because they're not paying into a pension, they don't have the protection later in life.
The report shows that over the last 2 decades, significant progress made by women in education hasn't translated into comparable improvements in their position at work.
So the report says we're not doing enough. We need to take this on sooner, and we need to have more of an impact.
At the global level, the employment gender gap has closed by only 0.6 percentage points since 1995, with an employment to population ratio of 46% for women and almost 72% for men in 2015. Now, last year, the Nigerian Stock Exchange recorded its first loss in more than 1 week, halting rallies that saw the all-share index rise by more than 6 percentage points last week. It shed 0.53% on Tuesday. Next is a graphic summary of closing figures from the nation's bourse. Now that's business news this morning. Thanks for watching.
All right, thank you very much, dear Leah Katum Babatunde, for the business package. Now it's time for us to take a look at the headlines in today's newspapers.
And to do the review for us again this morning, here is Bayo Atoyebi, who is already seated. Good morning to you, Bayo.
Good morning, Blessing. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, Kingsley.
All right, let's take a look at the headlines on the front pages. Again, in Lagos, we're back to the cases of collapsed structures. New Telegraph has a kicker: collapsed building. Nursing mother, baby, and 16 others die in Lagos. It has a rider, 13 rescued, many trapped. You can see the photographs from the scene of the collapsed structure yesterday. That's the worker there with his crash helmet. Of course, he was trapped in the rubble, and you see the attempts by the rescuers to free him from the rubble. And of course, the other persons who were there. It was a 5-story structure that collapsed yesterday, and this was in Lekki in Lagos. Now, that headline is similarly replicated on the front page of This Day, just above the name flag. Infant and 17 others die in Lagos building collapse. This Day has a story in greater detail on page 6.
Well, I have the Punch having the photograph there too on the front page with caption, 18 die in Lagos building collapse. Of course, pages 4, 5, and 12 as the story in full. And to the authority, we have the photograph as well, scene of the collapsed building where 18 persons died in Lagos yesterday. That's how it's captured in the front page. Okay, Bayo.
Well, sad development again. The story, the human interest aspect of it is the sad story of a woman who came from Benin Republic. He has not seen the husband for a long time and didn't believe that there was a problem, and so she came to find out what was the problem. And the husband said, well, we are owed salaries, we are not being paid, and he stayed the night in the house, and around 4 a.m. in the night, the building came down. But information indicated that the land where the structure stood was reclaimed in the year 2012, and the construction began in 2014. Owners of the structure had also stopped work since January because they discovered that substandard materials were being used. Many of those who were staying there were workers at the site who probably live very far and always try to spend the night within the premises to wake up the next day for doing the work. The general manager for the Lagos State Building Control Agency says that there was approval for the building from the district office. The story of the woman is quite sad. They lost the husband and her 2 babies. She came to try and find out what was holding the husband. Many artisans, carpenters, iron benders were actually trapped in the, but the process is still ongoing to rescue more of them.
Well, but I just wondering, at what point did they realize that the materials were substandard? That's a 5-story structure.
Yes.
A 5-story structure, that's one. And then the photograph you're seeing there on the front page of New Telegraph, and Blessing also had that on the front page of Punch. You can see that's a construction worker, and he has a safety helmet, which means that work was going on. You can see, yeah, yes. Apparently. Otherwise, I mean, assuming he was just a squatter, obviously he wouldn't be dressed the way he was dressed. Yeah, that's right. A 5-story structure. A 5-story structure.
A working iron bender within the premises said he had raised an objection that the beams there were not right, and the structural engineer who was supervising it said that they could make amendments to it, that they shouldn't worry. So something is certainly amiss about that, unfortunately. Yes.
All right, Bayo, let's go on to the front page again of this day. Again, above the name flag, the story about NNPC. President approves NNPC restructuring into 7 units and 20 companies. And 2 riders to that. Nigeria to stop importing petrol in 18 months, says Kachiku, that's the GMD of NNPC as well as Minister of State Petroleum. And House of Representatives, that is, opposes new structure. And Minister clarifies state oil firm has not been unbundled. House opposes new structure. Minister clarifies state oil firm has not been unbundled. That's right there on the front page. Now, New Telegraph has that story, but this is the headline it gives to it, and it's a capsule window just below the name flag of New Telegraph. It says, FG unbundles NNPC, appoints unit heads. Details of that story can be found on page 5. And then for Daily Trust, Blessing, at the foot of the front page of Daily Trust, the editor's choice, there are 3 headlines there. The last one with the story in greater detail on page 17, it reads, FG appoints heads for new NNPC units.
Okay, for the Punch, it's the boldest headline. We have federal government restructures NNPC with riders. Corporation gets 7 divisions, 20 subsidiaries, and also owes joint venture partners $5 billion. Petrol, kerosene subsidy not removed. But for the authority, still talking about the restructuring, but with a different number. Federal government restructures NNPC into 5 divisions. That is how the authority captures it this morning. Right.
Well, there's confusion about the number of divisions. Some are reporting 5, some are reporting 7. But we will come to that. But in the meantime, world oil crude price has been on the rise. Nigeria's Brent crude is now currently selling at $41.39. This rise has exceeded the $40 per barrel price that the U.S. shale oil producers see as a target for them to return to business. OPEC is expected to meet March 20 to strategize on higher oil prices. Nigeria is currently pumping 2.2 million barrels per day, which is 46%, and all of the 46% is from onshore. Our onshore production cost us between $13 to $15, so it's still within profitable margins. It is the offshore that costs about $30 per barrel to drill. Shale oil producers say that if it is going to rally beyond, not up to 30, then it doesn't make any profit sense for them to come into it, but they are certainly being challenged now. Now, the NNPC...
Just to add to that,
yes.
There's a report that South Africa is planning to begin shale oil production from next financial year.
Okay. Yes. Well, the way their odds look at the prices in the market and the cost of production and see compared to what the rates are across the world market before they will be able to think seriously of continuing with the NNPC says is working with joint venture partners so that they want to end petrol import in the next 12 to 18 months. By that strategy, it is expected that Nigeria will begin to export refined crude oil and also expand retail business. How is this to be done? Now, they will go to have joint venture partners who will come on to establish refineries by co-locating so that they'll be able to share pipeline and tankage facilities. This will enhance, eliminate completely the burden of importation. Anyway, but coming to that, along with that, is the unbundling of the NNPC. Now, some papers are reporting has been unbundled. Others are saying is to be unbundled. And the House of Rep has said that since the NNPC established by Cap 123 laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, the NNPC cannot tamper with that structure without recourse to the National Assembly. If the structure is internally not touching the law established an NNPC, because the management is responsible for day-to-day running of that agency. And therefore, it's within the prerogative of the chief executive and management, following the advice of the board, to determine the internal structure. But where it touches on the law establishing the NNPC, then they will probably be overstepping their bounds, and they will require the attention of the National Assembly.
Let's see
we'll see the details, as they come out in the media. Of course.
Okay, so talking about other headlines now. Of course, we are aware of the visit of the South African president in the country. So let's take a look at some of the words coming from our own president. For the authority, we have how MTN aided Boko Haram. This is coming from President Muhammadu Buhari. With rider, 120 South African companies operate in Nigeria, says Zuma, that's South African president. Okay, still on the MTN issue or the telecommunication, just above the basket for the Punch, we have SIM registration. MTN slow action aided Boko Haram, says Buhari.
Well, that headline is almost similarly replicated on the front page. It's a lead story, by the way, for Daily Trust, and it has a kicker, SIM registration. MTN's delay aided Boko Haram, and this is attributed to Buhari, and it has a rider, South Africa to ease visa restriction for Nigerians. Now, it's a lead story as well for This Day newspaper. This Day says, Buhari, that's the kicker, MTN feared Boko Haram insurgency. And first rider confirms telco in talks with FG on 780 billion naira fine. Zuma, our country's working to sort out $9 million arms money trapped in South Africa. Confirms again telco in talks with federal government on 780 billion naira fine. Bayo.
Well, those reports are talking about what had happened in the past. Currently, there's the visiting South African president is certainly going to engage Mr. President on negotiations. The whole idea is about the $5.2 billion fine imposed on MTN, which federal government graciously reduced to 78 billion naira. And that is become a subject of discussion now. Also, don't forget that, as reported there, $9 million belonging to Nigeria, meant for arms importation, is hanging somewhere in South Africa. So there will be jojo over this all, and I think it will be sorted out. But the emphasis is on the positive aspect of cooperation between Nigeria and South Africa. It has come to the fore that as far back as 1999, there were only 2 or 4 South African companies operating in Nigeria. Today, there are over 120, and that points towards significant economic activities between the two countries. Other stories that are trending, one human interest story. Let's go back to the story of the Honorable Minister of State that we lost in road accident. There are 3 aspects of the story. One, there is the burial of the Honorable Minister has been slated for some time next week. Secondly, Daily Trust has done a report on the Kaduna-Abuja highway, and it says that overspeeding, potholes are the basis for several incidences of accidents on the highway.
That's on the Abuja,
Kaduna highway.
It can be found on page 4 of
the
paper.
And they even say that the Kaduna-Abuja portion of the highway is worse compared to the Abuja to Kaduna area. In fact, they identified the area where the Honorable Minister accident happened at the Regina. The other developing story is that the driver of that vehicle has been visited by members of the Federal Road Safety Corps. They are investigating his role in the accident. A member of the family, Abdullahi Aliyu, of the late minister, has raised concerns that the driver is suspicious, and they have asked that question should be asked about how he was recruited. After the accident, he came out and is reported to have taken a photograph of the late minister and sent it on the internet. And they're beginning to wonder why he was engaged in such. Those are the emotions that are surrounding it.
All right, but just to add to that, we have New Telegraph. We had that story earlier in our bulletin, just below the name flag of New Telegraph. We are not hopeless, Ocholo's children. You can see them on the front page there of the photograph. And then just also another story, Herdsmen kill 40 in Benue village. That's from New Telegraph. It's on the front page. The details can be found on page 43. And then a health story. This could be contentious. Carbohydrates increase lung cancer risk. And that's the story. Details on page 6 of New Telegraph.
There are several alarms these days about health. But quickly,
very quickly.
Update. Yunus had his day in court.
Yeah, Bayo, just before we leave, just a story for the front page on the economy. Nigeria's GDP slows to 2.11% in fourth quarter. That's 2015 rather, as oil sector contracts. Details on page 8. Listen.
All right. I think that's it now for the review. Tomorrow is certainly another day. So many stories to take on, but that's where we close. Thank you very much, Bayo.
Thank you
See
for
you again
having
tomorrow. This is Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a break at this point to bring some messages, and it will be time to take on our discussion for the day.
Live together as brothers and sisters. Though we speak different languages and celebrate different cultures, we were still one Nigeria. There was no bombing, there was no kidnapping, and our children were not cultists. Now, we suspect one another as there are spreads of cultism, bombing, and kidnapping. How long shall this go on? Terrorism is alien, kidnapping is criminal, cultism is barbaric. Nigeria is a blessed country. Support the Nigeria Police and the fight against terrorism, kidnapping, and cultism. Always inform the police of any incident around you. Say something when you suspect something.
Remember, we all have a stake in building a crime-free Nigeria of our dream.
This message is from the Nigeria Police Force.
Taste the nectar of paradise. Tea exotic nectar in pineapple, coconut, multifruta, and other exotic flavors. The taste will take you there. Tea exotic nectar, escape to paradise.
From the House of Chi.
Dreams lie before me. Gotta seize the moment. Do you see it now? The sky from within. Oh, what a feeling! Oh, what a feeling!
Hollandia yogurt. Feel the goodness within. Flaunt the goodness outside. Hollandia yogurt. It's all good.
House of Chi.
Yes, the program is Good Morning Nigeria, showing on Africa's largest television network, the NTA. Now, to set the conversation proper, we have this background that for lives and property worth billions of naira have been lost in clashes between herdsmen and farmers in Nigeria. The clashes have taken place in various parts of the country, but have also occurred recently, repeatedly, in parts of Benue, Taraba, and Enugu states. Here's Anne Jibuno as she put this in perspective, so issues of these clashes, their impact, and steps taken to address them.
The destruction in former Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Olufalaye's farm, and his subsequent kidnap added a new dimension to the challenge of incessant clashes between farmers and herdsmen in Nigeria. Some of these clashes have occurred in parts of states like Enugu, Delta, Nasarawa, Plateau, Northwest Benue, precisely in Logo local government area, and the most recent in Benue South in Agatu local government area. President Muhammadu Buhari had to order an investigation into the Agatu clash due to the magnitude of destruction that occurred there. Observers have explained that the clashes usually occur when farmers refuse grazing on their land and are forced to confront heavily armed herdsmen. Arguments for and against setting up ranches and grazing areas for cattle rearers have dominated public discourse for a while now, with the National Assembly discussing the matter. The lawmakers proposed a solution through the National Reserves and Roads for Fulani Herdsmen Bill. From provisions in the bill, states are expected to provide lands to aid the actualization of the bill, a step some have described as the best way to curb incessant conflicts between nomadic herdsmen and farmers in the country. The bill is expected to help facilitate the establishment of a National Grazing Road and Reserve Commission. Others have drawn attention to the grave dangers such roads could pose to national peace and security. They are of the opinion that government should reposition intelligence agencies and the police to help address the challenge. They describe the step by the Inspector General of Police, Solomon Arase, to address stakeholders on the matter as one in the right direction. Other concerned bodies from across the country are proffering other strategies to bring about an end to the problem and hope the issue will be a thing of the past in Nigeria, especially with the level of concerted efforts being made.
Thank you very much, and Jibuno, for putting that in great perspective for us. And of course, we have a number of guests joining us to actually take a look at this incessant clashes on the increase and also taking a look at what solutions. With us in the studio here in Abuja, of course, we have other guests joining us from other locations from across Nigeria. We are being joined right now by Dr. Samuel Negedu, who is the National Coordinator, National Agricultural Foundation of Nigeria. Dr. Negedu, would like to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria today.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, Kingsley, we have other guests?
Yeah, that's right. We have two guests who will be joining us from our Kaduna Network Center. First, we'd like to welcome Dr. Chukwuma Osakwe. He's an associate professor in the Department of History and International Studies, as well as head of the Center for Study of Leadership and Complex Military Operations at the Nigerian Defense Academy in Kaduna. Dr. Osakwe, it's our pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, and good morning, Nigeria.
Well, also with him there is Malam Mohammed Bello Tukor. He's the National Legal Advisor of Mietiala. Malam Tukor, it's our pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you and good morning.
From our Just Network Center, we are being joined by Dr. Nasiruddin Usman. He's of the Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, that's NIPS, in Kuru near Jos. Dr. Usman, it's our delight to have you on the program this morning. All right, Blessing. Let's kick off this conversation with Dr. Usman. NIPS obviously is a think tank, and we understand that a number of studies have been done sometime in the past, and you have also been involved in the studies on the reported clashes between herdsmen and settled communities in the central parts of the country as well as in the southern parts of the country. We have touched on some of the causative factors in all of this, but what from your in-depth study are the remote and if not immediate causes of these incessant clashes that we see, together with the fatalities that have been increasing in recent times? Dr. Usman.
It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of the National Institute. Just like you've mentioned, the incessant conflict between herders and farmers has been of serious concern to the National Institute and of course to the nation. And a number of skeletal studies have been undertaken in this respect. From our own point of view, the primary cause of this conflict is associated with environmental factors. The consequence of climate change has made the savanna region, which has always been the base for grazing of cattle rearers, endangered, and therefore they have to move southward in search of pasture. Now, this coupled with the fact that, as has been reported in one of the reports by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture in 2009, of the 4,125 grazing reserves and routes, Only about 270 are operational. All the others have been turned into cultivating land by farmers. So that really brings the conflict, because it's a conflict about resource. The herdsman would like to graze his cattle while the farmer would like to protect his farmland. Now this is the primary cause, but unfortunately the conflict it turned violent because of some other factors that have been imposed, particularly the ethnicization and religious coloration the conflict has been given. Two, the proliferation of arms across West Africa in particular has further exacerbated the conflicts. We had always had this conflict, and it has always been resolved in an amicable way. But these other factors now have made this conflict violent to the extent that you have a whole village and community being wiped out. So I think, in our own opinion, government must have to look at the primary cause of this. This is what we've considered as the environmental factors, and make adequate measures to check this conflict for scarce resources. Then, of course, in the immediate term, there has to be the involvement of security agencies, not just in terms of the rail operation, but in terms of intelligence gathering, because it is quite wonderful the kind of lethal weapons that have been deployed in this conflict. So we need to up our intelligence gathering so that we'll know the source of these weapons. We know those who parade themselves as the foot soldiers of this conflict. And this is on both sides, because for the herdsmen, they've always complained of cattle rustling, which impose some criminal element into this conflict. Ordinarily, the conflict between herdsmen and farmers could have been resolved amicably using our traditional means that we're used to. But the imposition or the bringing up of the criminal elements who rustle cattle, who now use heavy weapons, calls for immediate attention of government. And I must say that government has not given the right proactive attention that this matter deserves. So I think government must look at it from these two perspectives: what we need to do immediately to curb the violence, and what we need to do in the long term to make sure that these environmental factors that are causative are adequately and appropriately checked.
All right, Dr. Nasruddin Usman, speaking to us from our Just Network Center. Thank you very much. You've already gone into aspects bordering on solutions to the frequent clashes that we're talking about. But one point that you made, you said it's one of the primary factors is environmental. And this question is going, of course, to our guests at the Kaduna Network Center. You know, they could be taken up by Dr. Osakwe or by Malam Mohammed Bello Tukor. Well over 40 years ago, I'm sure some of you must also have read a book. There's a book called Burning Grass, well, written by Cyprian and Quincy. And the opening stanza was that, or the opening paragraph was that, you know, when the grass begins to burn in the north, it's now time for, you know, the herdsmen to move down south. So at that time, there was no climate change. This was well over 40 years ago. So to what extent can we blame primarily, as Dr. Usman has said, climate change as a causative factor and the clashes that we are seeing between herdsmen and farmers?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. What Dr. Usman has said is very well taken, but I think there's some intellectual denial as to what is going on now. The use of the word conflict or clash is a euphemism for what is actually going on, which is more of a war. The Oyo State incident of 1994 to 2001 have already been called a war of sorts by people who have studied it. What we are seeing right now is a situation where an issue which has been managed over the years have taken a character that is reminiscent of a war situation. You are looking at, in the past 5 years, about 6,500 dead in 4 middle belt states of the country. You are looking at what is at stake, 20 million livestock in the country. You are looking at approximately 50% of Nigeria's GDP at peril. You are looking at loss, which has been estimated to be about $13 billion annually. If this is not a war situation, I wonder what else it will be called. Yes, you may not want to use the word terror or terrorism because it's perspective driven and it's actually part of the tactical repertoire for the two groups, the two economic groups, the farmers and the herdsmen. You may not want to use insurgency because it's not directed at the state, but the reality of the matter is that a lot is going on. When we flash back to the burning grass by Cyprian Ekwensi, it shows that yes, the grass were burnt, and that what is happening now and advancing land and climate issues as the reason is not sufficient to explain what is going on. But like all wars, when they start, they take a whole character of their own. And most of the times, what would have led to the beginning of it is lost in the discourse. And I guess some of the resource persons here will address that issue. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sakwe. Of course, we'll be right back to take a look at some of those other points that will be thrown up in the course of this discussion. But I would like to, at this point, welcome one of our guests, too, who's just joined us, the Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of operations. Of course, Sotoye Leroy Wakama is our guest on the program as well this morning. Thank you very much, DIG Sotoye.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a look at the clashes that we've witnessed in recent times. Of course, it's becoming a worrisome situation, and it's a security challenge, no doubt. And before it blossoms into that which is a national threat, which if it's not already taking that dimension, what exactly is happening with security coverage of some of these areas? Whereas we know most of them are in remote locations, as has been pointed out, but is the police overwhelmed in some of the activities of checkmating these headsmen and clashes continuing with their settled communities?
Well, thank you. First of all, I'd like to condole and sympathize with the loved ones of those who have lost persons in this clash and property. A lot of people have been displaced, and I'm sure you're well aware of the consequences of displaced persons. Everything has a little history, and I came in and was listening to some of the things that have been said. And in this particular case, from the point of view of the police, we could isolate, if you like, a catalyst 2 or 3 years back, 2013, I think it was, if my memory serves me right, about this period, peak of the hammer time period, March or so in that 2013, when a particular herdsman, quite influential, well-to-do, was found killed in the general geographical precincts of Agatu. I say that because we don't have any particular evidence that he was killed by an Agatu person, but in that general area. And of course, prior to this time, let's face facts, prior to this time, the communities had, that is the herdsmen and the Agatu communities, they'd been living, and associating, interacting relatively peacefully. But this particular incident, which must have been engendered by something else, which I don't know at this point in time, but this particular incident led to suspicions, enmity, hostility, and it, sort of spiraled down into the violence we've seen today. And that was, as you said, just a couple of years back, 2013. Government was not resting on its haunches at that time, and particularly the two state governments of Nasarawa and Benue, they spent time, resources, man-hours to bring these people together, and that was a part of it, so I'm speaking from direct experience here, to bring the two groups together, stakeholders together, and discuss and find out exactly what was wrong. And we had very many insightful presentations from the people there. I'm sorry, the insightful here is with the S, not with the C. So some of the issues that have been raised by your previous speakers as the causes for this thing were also raised during that. But that isn't particularly the preserve of the police, even though we participated in it. So if you ask what we're doing, if we're overwhelmed, as people like to say, etc., I think that's a double-edged sword in a manner of speaking. First and foremost, no, we are not overwhelmed. There are things that we have done, but there are things that we could do further, and I'll let you know what they are. First and foremost, with this particular crisis, what we've done is we've put in more visibility, more post personnel there to try and reassure persons. If you like, create a sort of buffer between the Fulanese headmen and the communities that are being attacked. We've also deployed our intelligent assets, both the technical and the human assets, to get information as to who are really behind these attacks and who are causing them and such like. We've also conducted investigations, and we're going to prosecute 1 or 2 persons, because you can't be killing people and having property destroyed and then, it looks as if the state is not doing anything about it. So that is going on. And then finally, our interface, if you like, with other security services, the military, for instance, stakeholders within those communities, religious leaders, traditional leaders, elders, all, the lot. We've been interfacing with them. What we would like to do and what we have proposed to government, because both sides in this divide are unfortunately quite heavily armed. So we want to see if we can have a program for disarming these people. And it wouldn't be the first time, because in Kano, I think with the cattle rustlers, there was a disarming program which went successfully. Down south in River State, the south where I come from, the militants were also successfully disarmed. So we believe it can be done in this instance also. And then finally, we're also hoping with government approval that we can set up a mobile police squadron in that general area, which will, when I mean set up, it will be domiciled there, perpetually, as it were, which would dominate the area for one thing. It would be a resource for intelligence, because it would be able to check the activities of both sides. It would act as a deterrence to both sides, being there physically. And if, for instance, violence were to erupt at any one time or the other, our response time would also be a lot more efficient, being that we're already in place there. So those are the sort of strategies we're looking at.
All right, DIG Wakama, well, thank you very much. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Dr. Negado, you're still with us in the Abuja studios, but I would like, we'll come to you also presently. I would like to go back to Kaduna Network Center, where we earlier introduced the National Legal Advisor to Mietiala, is Malam Mohammed Bello Tuko. Mr. Malam Bello, well, we had you, of course, in the studios here in Abuja some months ago. That was last year, when we were discussing cattle rustling. Your contribution was quite helpful. Now, on this occasion, I would like you to respond to an aspect that the DIG has just mentioned. The DIG says that the trigger for what happened in Agatu in Benue State obviously was probably a reprisal attack. But from our background report and from stories that are reported very frequently in the media, attacks or clashes have also taken place in other parts of the country other than in Agatu. We find clashes in Enugu State, we find clashes in Delta. We also find clashes, of course, in the Southwest. The example of Chief Olufala is also there for us to reference. Now, what exactly is going on, in the community of Mietiala?
I think, first of all, we have to go back to what Dr. Nuruddin had said. He had laid a very good foundation as to some of the ecological factors that are responsible for the movement of herders into other ecological zones outside the traditional grazing zones like we used to have in the savannah. And then, he also mentioned the issues of, bringing in Nigerian fault lines into it, the issues of religion, the issues of geography, the issues of politics, and all the other aspects into it. But like I said, I will disagree with my colleague in Kaduna who had described it as a war situation. I think the primary cause of it is, like the DIG said, the issues are still, the issues of, harder farmer disputes that snowball into what we have seen In fact, we have witnessed this kind of disputes in several states, not only in the Middle Belt states, like he said, or in the South. No, we have witnessed this kind of conflicts in Gombe, we have witnessed it in Yobe, we have witnessed it in Zamfara. In fact, in Zamfara, it is as terrible as any other place that you can imagine. You know, we also have the same kind of conflicts in Niger, the same kind of conflicts in Kaduna also. So it is not restricted, you know, people will play the specter of religion or play the specter of, you know, trying to occupy land or do this kind of thing. No, it is not. The primary reasons for this conflict is, look, what are the issues that we should address in terms of putting up the structures? These issues have been proposed severally. One, you know, the issues are one, you know, grazing. Where is the pasture that the pastoralists can graze on? Two, the issue of water. Three, the issue of security. Four, the issue of, the issue of vet governance. If you have this kind of structures in place, then you will have a minimal of this conflict. In the early 60s, everybody, so I think Dr. Noor did mention about the grazing reserves. Those grazing reserves he is mentioning were established in the in the early 1960s. They were established because probably leaders then had the foresight that we will begin to witness what we are witnessing today. 415 of them of record, and of recent, Oyo State has also created a grazing reserve. Ogun has also created grazing areas. I think Enugu also is proposing to create grazing areas. I think I've interacted with the Attorney General of Enugu State. Whether he's still the one there or he's another one, I don't know. But these are the kind of things we want to witness. We want to see, you know, the development challenges that trigger these conflicts should be addressed. You know, we shouldn't look at it from the angle of, look, it is a war situation or it is an occupation situation. No. And if you see what is happening in northern Nigeria, particularly in the Savannah areas, a little bit different from what happens in the central states that you see. Like in the north, you know, you have cereals that are grown. In the central zone, you know, you have cassava, you have yams. These are tubers that require, you know, over a particular period. If you take cassava, for example, it is a crop that it's always being cultivated. So it is unlike in the north where you will harvest your crops and then pastoralists will come and graze on the residue. It is unlike that with, you know, with cassava or with yams. So that you can see the variance in terms of the ecology and in terms of the practices that will trigger this kind of conflict. But like he said, you know, some of the conflicts are reprisal attacks that happen. You know, it is definitely like that. But once you address the development challenges that trigger these conflicts, I believe we will have a minimum, we will have it at a minimal level.
Malam Mohammed Bello, we'll come back to you, and because of this, now back to our Abuja studios. Dr. Negado, you've listened to all the other guests, including the GIG, providing the security perspective to this conversation. Ecology has been raised as a factor. Now, you're the National Coordinator of the National Agricultural Foundation of Nigeria. One point that some observers have also harped on is the fact that, look, when are we going to migrate from this centuries-old culture or tradition, as it were, of herdsmen moving along rather than establishing settled ranches?
Thank you. As part of the activities of the National Agricultural Foundation of Nigeria, we have advocacy. And in February, we had a workshop here in Abuja that discussed areas of new policy in agriculture. And during the discussions, we touched heavily on the issue of the farmer-pastoralist conflict. One thing that we easily forget in Nigeria is that policy makers over the years have never forgotten that they had these conflicts. From the 50s into the 60s, and they addressed them head on. And even development partners came to our aid. In Kaduna, we have the NLPD, the National Livestock Development Program, funded by the World Bank. And these grazing reserves were all done by them. And all states were brought on board. Infrastructure were developed. But there was no buy-in. The states were created, and the different governments had different ways of addressing the management of the grazing reserves. And they broke down. They are in very deplorable conditions. And there's a need for us to engineer the process to reactivate them. But then, can we continue with the traditional way of keeping livestock in Nigeria? No, we cannot. It is necessary for us at this point now to say, let them be sedentary and provide adequately, establish these grazing reserves, get the pastoralists settled adequately. We are even recommending that government should go a long way to give some form of assistance to those who agree to settle so that they don't wander around the whole country. A good number of times in these communities, you find out that there are issues with night grazing, underage people, children going with livestock. We've also found out that though there is this talk about climate change, it had been there with us. That cannot be blamed. But when you venture from your traditional areas into people who are not used to you grazing at their back, there'll surely be conflict. But I'm happy that we are playing between two extremes. The farmers and pastoralists will always be there. But criminality has crept into the process, and it is beginning to affect agriculture in Nigeria. In most of these communities, you will find out that most farmers can hardly get by because they are afraid of going to their farms. And I'm telling you, the knowledge we have of their Gado areas in Zamfara and all other parts of this country is that most of them are unable to access their farmlands. There are too many reprisal attacks. I need government. As the Minister of Agriculture had said, there is an urgent need to regrass these grazing reserves, re-establish them and more, and add the state governments to buy into the program. If not, the conflicts will come, they will go, and the problem will remain with us.
Well, does that speak to the point articulated by Dr. Osakwe from our Kaduna Network Center that perhaps these are the stirrings of a much bigger conflagration as if we do not handle the problems very well? In other words, I mean, let me take the question to Dr. Usman of NIPS at our Jos Network Center. Dr. Usman, you listen to the points already articulated by the other guests, especially the categorization also by Dr. Osakwe as to the nature of the conflict. Now, how do we contextualize the fact that there have been suggestions that in persons who are engaged in these reprisal attacks are probably mercenaries from outside Nigeria, and that, of course, you have free movement of the herdsmen from the westernmost parts of West Africa right across through Central Africa, and that it is not those who are familiar with one another, say in Benue or elsewhere, that actually launch these attacks, but that they recruit mercenaries, and of course mercenaries are a critical element in any war.
Thank you. Well, I think I may not necessarily agree with what Dr. Osakwe has said, because to do that will be to magnify the conflict probably beyond what we could ordinarily manage. Yes, I agree that there are some criminal elements, and unfortunately this is happening at a time when West Africa and probably Africa is at a great risk of violent conflict, particularly with the destruction of Libya and the free flow of small arms into other countries. There is that problem. Of course, we have to recognize it. But I think if we internationalize the conflict, we may take it beyond the limit which we can really address it. And I now come back to the point which the DIG said. Yes, it will appear to an ordinary Nigerian that the police or the security agencies indeed are overwhelmed. I don't know why even the Inspector General of Police in his meeting in Agatu mentioned that there are fewer policemen and therefore people will have to live in peace. I think that is a self-defeatist approach to the issue. The point is, we have to look at the immediate solutions to the problem. And we don't know where these arms are coming from. If there are mercenaries, we don't know where the mercenaries are coming from. Therefore, we need to have an interagency cooperation in terms of intelligence gathering, so that you don't wait until when the attack has happened, a whole village or community is being wiped out before the security agencies will respond. In terms of the criminality, just like in the case of Agatu, the Miete Allah were complaining that about 4,000 cattle were stolen from them. These are issues which the security agencies must be open about to deal with the problem, because you can't herd away 4,000 cattle and claim that nobody will know where they're coming from. So we need to up really our efforts in terms of intelligence gathering and dealing with the problem before it erupts violently. Now, finally, in terms of my response to what the representative of Agricultural Society has mentioned, yes, in the long term, maybe we must have to look at the possibility of getting the Fulanis domesticated, having their ranches. But the point we must have to understand, to the Fulani man, cattle rearing is more than an economic activity. It is part of their socio-cultural lives. And just like it is happening in the international community, the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous People have always maintained that if you must have to impose modernity and development to people considered indigenous, you must have to carry along with them the socio-cultural pattern. It's just like the Indians of the United States or the Maoris in New Zealand. So it's not something that could be imposed. I think we need to review the nomadic education program, which largely government has abandoned, and infuse into it this concept of modern cattle rearing by way of ranches. Also infuse curriculum relating to peace and conflict resolution, so that by and large, at some point in time, the Fulanis will see it by themselves that it's better for them to adopt the modern way of cattle rearing, because that will give them more benefits. So I think first thing first, now we need to look at the immediate challenges which we have that is leading to destructions of lives and property. And the government must have to be very proactive. Then we look at the medium solution in terms of providing grazing lands and water holes. Then in the long term, we look at the possibility of domesticating the Fulanis to have cattle ranches which would be more beneficial to them, but this cannot be imposed, but rather they have to be carried along, and probably even there has to be some economic incentives on the part of the government, because everybody knows they also contribute a lot to the national economy. Thank you.
Doctor, of course, that's...
well, that's Dr. Nasruddin Usman of the NIPS at Kuru near Jos. Would like to thank you for participating in our discussion this morning. We have another guest, of course, who we are bringing in this time from our Ibadan Network Center. Dr. Usman, thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bring in the guest who is joining us from our Ibadan Network Center, assuming we have the connections already. Let's go back again to our Kaduna Network Center. The Kaduna Network Center, Dr. Sakwe, let's explore the aspects. I mean, it would appear that, the guests are saying, particularly Dr. Usman, who just signed off, as well as Malam Mohammed Bello Tuko, who's beside you there in Kaduna, that it's probably hyperbolic, to refer to this, what's going on as a war situation. But still, it's worrisome that headsmen these days are armed. In the past, again, years past, the much you saw them carry probably was a sword or a dagger. But these days, you see them bearing arms. What does this tell us, and how should the security agencies begin to respond to this?
Kingsley, I'm not in disagreement with what has been said so far. What I think we should do is call the situation as it is, so we may better appreciate and look for solutions to it. One of the resource persons said that both groups are heavily armed. Yes, they are armed with equipments like AK-47. They are not manufactured in Nigeria. So that means that the problem is internationalized. There's a global perspective to it. There is also enormous destruction going on. Yes, you can build grazing lands, you can set up education, which is a very good aspect of the suggestions meted out so far. But if you don't call it what it actually is, we will not be able to address the problem. Now, every word that has been used so far by my colleagues here have all suggested a war situation. Violence, guns, intelligence gathering, and of course persecution. The DIG mentioned putting mobile policemen or policemen at corners in Agatu. Agatu is just one of the 36 states of the Federation. We have this issue as a national problem. And if it's a national problem, it must be addressed. I'm actually interested in also hearing things like, it's a national problem, but it has taken a character of its own, which must be addressed locally in the context of where these things emanate. We have peace activists all over the place. No one has suggested deploying them to the local governments to see if they can enhance the capacities of local governments, which I think is the tier of government that should be addressing this thing at the local level before it becomes a state or a national issue. So the grazing lands that have been abused and the issues not addressed at that level, they're okay. But I think we better call it what it is. People are losing their lives. It's not a regional issue. It is a national issue. I hope when I gave the two examples of Oyo State and Middle Belt, I wasn't talking about a section of the country. No, I am talking about the 36+1 of the Federation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Osakwe. Of course, we'll need to take a look at the different tiers of government since we've also looked in this direction. All the different tiers need to be involved. But how much of the response so far, it's as if there seems to be some kind of shying away from the actual issue on ground. What exactly are the different tiers not doing correctly or taking on correctly to actually address the issue between the farmers and, of course, the herdsmen, really in terms of security, posing, of course, a national security for us now? The response.
I think that this issue, because it's taking a character of its own, for every conflict, or in this case, for every war, there must be a local variant, a local perspective to it. So the reprisals could go back and forth. It could be chieftaincy issue. It could be personalized leadership egos back and forth. So I think the problem should start locally. And if the local governments, unfortunately, a significant number of them are not even statutory. They are, what do they call them these days? Transition local governments. Every 3 or 6 months, they change them. How can they sustain peace at that level? And they may not have all the capacity that is needed to manage peace. That is where you can get all the peace activists in the country. Deploy them. There are only 774 local governments, for crying out. You can deploy them there to help these local governments manage each and every one of these conflicts. To disarm people, it's never done with all sincerity. There is no perfect disarmament of people. There will be arms out there. Even when you disarm, it's easy to purchase these things from mercenaries and from international market or black market. So I think the important thing is to have peace so that the issues that lead to these farmer-herdsmen clashes will be taken at its root. And that's why we should call it what it is. It is war. It's destructive. It's it's threatening the economic capacity and the image of the country, actually. Thank you.
Dr. Sakwe will be right back with you, people in Kaduna. That's yourself and also the Miyetti legal advisor there. But joining us now from my Ibadan Network Center is Professor Olawale Albert, is the Chairman Board of Trustees, Society for Peace Studies and, of course, Practice. Would like to say thank you for joining us on the program this morning, Professor Albert.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Well, yes, Professor Albert, I'm sure you must have had the benefit of listening to the other guests before where we introduced you a moment ago. What's your take on what's going on and what can be done? Because we're wrapping up the conversation now, getting to see what can be done. I mean, Dr. Sakwe talks about the international dimension to this. Arms, of course, are plenty on both sides, as the DIG with us has also indicated. And then, of course, proposals about grazing reserves and who, where and when will you have those grazing reserves? Do we have to deal with the problematic question of land ownership in terms of allocating land for grazing reserves? What do we need to do?
Well, thank you very much. All the contributors came up with monocausal explanations of what is obviously a very complex problem. But I think when we put all the arguments together, what we're telling Nigerians is that we have a very serious problem on our hands. We are not too sure whether to call it a war, but I think the problem is very, very complex. Now, we have had a number of interventions in the past that I think the federal government of Nigeria can borrow from. In the year 2000, there was the Fulani and Yoruba farmers clashed in the Okeogun area of Oyo State, 5 local government areas. And the present president of Nigeria, General Buhari, and some northern Nigerian leaders actually came to Ibadan with a very, very powerful delegation to meet Governor Lam Adesina of Oyo State. But before they came to Oyo State, the American government, you said OTI, commissioned me to start a peace process in Okeogun area. And we were able to arrest the problem. We set up peace committees to deal with the problems at the local government level. But these peace committees did not survive more than 3 months. Local governments were not ready to pay transport allowances to those Fulani people and those Yoruba farmers that agreed to be managing the process. So I think the problem lies more with the Nigerian state. Nigeria is always looking for external forces to manage its problems. And I think we need to get out of that. We are a nation. We must build this nation together. We should stop waiting for international development agencies to build our country. So what we're trying to say in essence is that this problem is not as complex as we're thinking. There are local resources, resources for managing the problems. But the question is that the governance structure for supporting these local peace processes are not there. And as long as the state is not ready to actually do its job, I think we'll continue to have more and more of these problems. But the Fulani herdsmen are very armed. The local farmers are also armed. And we pray that this problem doesn't get out of hand.
Well, sorry, is it a question of prayer, or a question of adopting the right mechanism in order to deal with this challenge? We've already talked about various peace committees ordinarily which could be activated with the support of local governments. A lacuna, of course, already identified by Dr. Sakwe. What exactly do you think normally would trigger a conflict? Let's again back up and say what would trigger a conflict, and to what extent my peace committees be available to arrest a problem before it becomes a problem?
Well, we have 4 major causes of this type of problem. Competition for resources. We have identified environmental problems. Yes, they are very, very important. We have a clash of value systems, ethnicity, religion. We have a problem of psychological needs of some individuals. Some individuals make trouble. And if the state is not actually managing the problems they create very, very well, They make a very big profession of troublemaking, and I think this is what we're witnessing in Nigeria. We also have problems of communication. Are the ethnic groups, are the different groups in Nigeria actually talking, exchanging information? Now, I ended my last, point with a prayer. I'm saying this in the sense that I've written 28 books on conflict situations in Nigeria. There is no conflict situation in this country on which we have not produced a book. But the question is, do our leaders read? Are our leaders aware of the problems of this country? They are not aware. Most of the time, people contact us from outside Nigeria on crafting solutions to our problems. And when you ask them, why are you inviting me as a person? They tell you we're inviting you because you will know that you document this problem as early as this period. Now, what we're referring to as Boko Haram crisis in Nigeria today, we produced our first literature on it in 2003 when that group was operating as ECOMOG. So we understand what the problems of this country, we understand what the problems are. But the question is that we have very, very weak governance structure for managing the problems. And those who are working on these problems outside the state cannot actually solve all the problems. The best we can do is to provide the knowledge, about what the problems are and to make recommendations of what the solutions should look like. But if the state is always waiting for a white man to come and solve his problems, we continue to have this we continue to have escalation of our problems. And I think that was why I said probably we should be praying, because we have done everything that should be done to help this nation, but I don't think the nation is ready to be helped.
Professor
blessing. I don't think. Well, Dr. Albert, thank you very much. We'll come back to you. I don't think that we are that pessimistic. Otherwise, we will be discussing the problems and then seeking to find solutions, particularly with the guests that we still have with us in the Abuja studios and then also in Kaduna. By the way, you have the Twitter handle on the screen at NTAGMN, and the tweets have come in torrents, but we're going to take some of them now before we continue this conversation. Listen.
Okay, for Ibedeme, Dominic, he has his message this way. The federal government should have deployed soldiers long ago to secure lives before peace talks. Obasanjo did it in Otuacha in Anambra State then.
All right, this is one coming from Olusegun Dosumu. It's always an eyesore seeing cow dung littered everywhere on some of our roads, yet we call Abuja the fastest growing city.
For Solomon Dembo, it says, are the farmers and the herders aware of the segregation between the grazing reserves and the farmlands?
And then one from Bright, Irene, right? Drought or no drought, that's not an excuse for roaming farms and streets, destroying others' belongings. This is unacceptable to us.
Okay, for Era Adebola, this is all too simple. Separate grazing land from farmland and let each party stay within their confines.
Shem Haruna tweets, the issue of herdsmen and farmers has gone beyond control. I think politicians are also using them to achieve their evil plans.
And for Sani Michael Omakoji, we have vast land wasting and left fallow. It should be used as, well, I think he wants to say grazing reserve, because actually at game reserve, to put an end to these barbaric killings. Nomadism should not be mistaken for fundamental right. It should be discouraged, as it comes with a lot of destruction.
Dembo tweets again, until these clashes are addressed as soon as possible, farming, no matter how lucrative, may not be enticing because of insecurity. All right, well, gentlemen, we'll take some other tweets in the course of the conversation. Before we come to the DIG, let's go back to the National Legal Advisor of Mieti Allah. Malam Mohammed Bello Truko, you've listened again to the guests. One point that Dr. Nasruddin Usman from NIPS made from our Jos Network Center before we signed him off was the fact that, look, cattle rearing or the life of the herdsman isn't just an economic activity. It's a way of life. It's a culture. Are there things that others may need to understand, or that the herdsmen themselves also need to understand about other people, so that they are on the same frequency, on the same wavelength, and therefore can attenuate the frequent clashes that we've been seeing in recent times?
I didn't get you.
Sorry, you didn't hear me? Okay, let me recast my question. Dr. Usman of NIPS who spoke to us from our Just Network Center indicated quite clearly that the herdsmen do not just regard cattle rearing or pastoralism as an economic activity. Rather, it's a way of life. Now, if it's a way of life for them, it means that it's a tradition. And so for proper interaction, in other words, to minimize the conflict between settled farmers and other communities, are there things that other people need to understand about the cattle herdsmen or the cattle rearers, and the cattle rearers themselves also need to understand about the way of life of the settled communities?
This is not a new area. The representative or the speaker from the Agri Council who just spoke had mentioned it clearly. There used to be traditional relationship between grazers and farmers. For example, in the place where I grew up, I can say this and as a clear example. I know it as a fact that when farmers harvest their crops, of course they belong to another ethnic group. When they harvest their crops, they will come to my father, then a cattle owner, they will come and meet him and tell him, Alaji, we have harvested our crops. Could you kindly please send your cattle? Now, they used to have consultative frameworks. There used to be understandings. But now, to link it up to the issue of ecology, you now have herders who are now moving into areas that are not traditionally their own grazing zones. So they don't understand the culture and the farming activity of the groups that they are now meeting. Of course, influenced by other factors that we had earlier mentioned. So we are always neglecting a critical component of the stakeholders. That is the traditional rulers and community leaders. In the course of our understanding, we have come to understand that you must involve them, the youth groups, the women groups, the community leaders, not only to bank on traditional rulers alone. So that way, you will now have an integral understanding of the farming activity of the farmers and then the grazing activity of the herders. So that way, you will now have a clear understanding, and then you have an early warning and response system put in by the governors. But as it is now, the local governments, as it is, don't even seem to take any responsibility in what we are talking about, respectively to them. The state governors have not bought into activities that the federal government have embarked upon. If you look at the grazing areas, there are certain contributions that the state governors ought to make. But now everybody is transferring responsibility to the federal government. What are the state governors doing? That is an aspect we should also look at, because the Land Use Act vests the ownership of land on the state governors. So unless if the state governors are willing to contribute towards finding a solution to this issue, then we will keep on having this problem. Thirdly, how do we involve stakeholders? Last year, there was a security conference on pastoralism that was held here in Kaduna. It brought together almost all the actors together under one forum. We brought in the herders, we brought in, the policymakers and decision takers under one umbrella, so that you don't have a filtered information, so that you sit together and then understand what happened to that report. In fact, the gentleman who was from Kuru, in 2001, there was a Kuru conference on pastoralism. It brought almost all the actors. The report is there. What happened to that report? Last year, there was another committee that the federal government set up to look at the issues of grazing reserves and stock routes and then livestock production in Nigeria. That report had also been submitted to government, and we are still talking about it now. Now again, probably there will be another committee again to look at this. So how long shall we keep on moving in ripple manner, without taking active actions to find solutions to the crisis that we now have? It is unfortunate everybody is losing his life. Nobody wants it that way. Like I told you, I grew up in a community where we had excellent relationship with the farmer community, even though almost all of us belong to different ethnic groups. In fact, when I was in Oyo, I have met Fulani youths who cannot speak Fulfulde. In my place where I grew up, I can speak the native language. So we have a clear understanding. So there is need for this understanding. And then there's need, like the gentleman from NIST said, to transform the sector, not to impose solutions.
All right. Thank you very much. I would like to say a big thank you to both yourself. That's Mohammed Bello Tukuru, National Legal Advisor, Miyetti Al, of course, representing the Fulani herdsmen, of course, taking a look at what should be done. We appreciate you greatly and all your contribution to the program this morning.
Thank you.
Associate Professor in the Department of History and International Studies and Head Center for Study of Leadership and Complex Military Operations, Nigeria. Defense Academy, NDA Kaduna. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, back to us here in Abuja studio.
Yeah,
of course, earlier on, of course, the DIG
just
has
before we take the DIG, we have some tweets that have also come in. I think we should just read those tweets. Dominic Oga tweets, trying to establish grazing reserves for the cattle is a good idea, but how will the government change their nomadic lifestyle? And Ibrahim Tudu also tweets, cattle routes and grazing reserves are like petroleum pipelines. They should be recognized and protected. You know, cattle are important to the economy.
Okay,
and,
Ibrahim Tudu says Miyetti Allah is an important organization that have helped to stem the situation before, but has compromised based on politics and divisions.
And then Aminu Uba Al-Hassan tweets, are the headsmen above the law? Their action is a pointer. They eat up what farmers spend months to nurse, and that's their means of livelihood. Okay,
DIG Wakama, of course, there have been issues of concealment of arms and ammunition. I remember at least you talked about them too at your opening remark when you came into the studio this morning. But containing some of this aspect of ammunition and arms on both sides, I think that is one aspect that we need to actually checkmate if we need to actually have this peace negotiation. I don't know how much of those interventions is already being worked out.
We do have, like I said, intelligent assets, technical platform, human resource, personnel in the intelligence industry, if you like, who have been giving us feedback on certain things that have been happening. With respect to arms that are in the hands of both the Fulani herdsmen and indeed the other communities. And in the case of the herdsmen, sometimes it can become the other linkages. You may have heard what the Borno State government said about the selling of cattle and the linkage with perhaps BH and things like that. And as one of the gentlemen did say here, it's internationalized in the sense that some of these arms are coming from outside of Nigeria, possibly Libya, where there are other conflicts and all that. And I don't want to get into semantics as to whether this is a war of conflict. As far as I'm concerned, it's all the same. Retrieving these arms is not as easy as most people would like to think. Yes, it is the responsibility of law enforcement, but let's look at the global picture here. Law enforcement anywhere in the world is usually conducted in, well, rural areas, but built-up areas and urban areas. We as a police force and police forces around the world are not trained to go into bushes and fight. But we're finding ourselves having to do this, even in the conflict in the Northeast alongside with the military, because of the circumstances that we're being confronted with. In Zamfara State, quite a number of these arms have been recovered from cattle rustlers or cattle herders and some other groups who decide to inhabit themselves in forested areas, etc. We do, like I said, with the assistance of some of our sister services, the DSS, even the civil defense and other customs, immigrations who occupy the borders. We do have information, as it were, and some statistics rather, on arms that come into the country and how they come in and where they go out from, etc. But again, when it comes to an international situation, there are other protocols that have to be observed. You can't just walk into another country and do what you need to do. There are certain protocols that delay that sort of action. And we're hoping that in time, with the aid of the Ministry of Justice, we can have some of these agreements made, mutual legal agreements signed and things like that, so that when we have information regarding the involvement maybe of, well, not involvement of other countries, but those countries being routes for this sort of things, we'll be able to address it. But within the country itself, we are stretched quite thin. There are quite a number of conflicts that are going on in this country at the moment. And the police as a service is really stretched to the fullest part of its elasticity.
As well.
Yes, exactly. And these things, we should really look at it as it is. If we want to be able to track some of these people, we're going to need assets that are not just human, but are technologically based.
I was wondering, DIG, just to interject, is this an engagement for the police force alone? What level of interagency cooperation would enhance the capacity of the state to respond to this. I mean, you mentioned the DSS. Obviously, you have the DSS everywhere in the country. I mean, you have mentioned civil defense. They're all over the place. So if the police, as it were, is having to battle on many fronts, where is the support coming from other agencies?
The support has always been there. But like I said, sometimes the synergy between services, there can be, little niggles here and there. But for instance, with the DSS, we have a good relationship. We have a good relationship with the civil defense. And now that most of these agencies are under one umbrella in terms of the Ministry of Interior, it is getting better every day. But like I said, the problems, the conflicts, the issues that are abound in Nigeria at the moment are quite many. And even as the DIG operations, I'm distracted from one issue to the other. I'm in the northeast at one point, you're down in the south another day, another sort of thing.
Would there be other means to engage the populace, of course, as the communities involved, to actually help in actually stemming some of these issues?
These engagements have never stopped. Even before this crisis began, we have engaged communities. We talk to grassroots levels. We talk to traditional rulers. We talk to religious leaders. We talk to leaders in communities. We talk to even the National Union of Road Transport Workers. We talk to vigilantes. We talk to hunter groups in the forest, all as a means to try and get intelligence on what is happening and when it is happening and where it is happening. So the engagements have never stopped. The simple fact of the matter to me is that the public, as it were, knows more than we do regarding some of these things that are going on. And for reasons best known to them, sometimes they keep this information to themselves. But this assertion that when they give information to the police, it is misused or one thing or the other, I think that's in the days of the past. And in any case, even if it were true, is it better than the deaths they're experiencing at this moment? This information should be given to us.
Yeah, and then DIG, one of the tweets we read out earlier, of course, will provoke the question that are these conflicts, are these clashes so sui generis that they are not amenable to criminal prosecution?
No, you've gone into long language too.
In other words, I mean, of course, you understand what I'm saying. Okay, for the benefit of our viewers, I mean, the question is, why aren't persons being arrested and prosecuted? I mean, there's a law on firearms if you have illegal possession of firearms. And then, of course, if there is arson, you burn down a person's property and you kill a person, that's murder or unlawful taking of life.
My dear, people are being prosecuted on a daily basis. But it's not the duty of the police to say, hey, we are prosecuted. It's not our responsibility to do that. They're being prosecuted on a daily basis. This Agatu crisis, the crisis before and all that, there are persons who have been arrested and prosecuted. It just takes people to go into the books and or go to the courts or whatever. In those days, the media houses would have journalists or whatever in courts who court reporters. That's right. So, I mean, why is it not being reported? This is a really dire situation, and we expect that each segment of society should meet up to its responsibility in that respect.
All right, Dr. Negedu.
Thank you very much. I feel very much that what the police is doing is treating the symptoms. The fundamentals have not been addressed. And most of the contributors have talked about the role of governments at all levels. The police is being burdened because when these things happen, they have to treat. And they keep on coming in multiples. We believe that if the federal government has set an agenda through its concern that this be treated, then the state governments, all state governments, because these are national issues, should come on board to address them. The local governments, as we found out today in agriculture, are almost not there. And if they don't assist, it will not happen. Like the case in Oyo State, if people agree to do the needful and they are not being taken care of to make them happen, these things will not happen. We believe that all arms must be on deck so that these issues will not keep on coming and the police will be there. The police have other jobs to do other than being on the farms.
All right. Dr. Negudu, thank you very much. We appreciate that perspective, and we hope the listening ears of the government is right on this program today. Okay, quick dash to Ibadan Network Center now, where we'll still have a guest. I would like to take your last word. Of course, the needful is what we must do at this point. What should that be, briefly?
I think what I would recommend is increased involvement of state and local governments in the management of these problems. The problems are not taking place in Abuja. They take place in villages, they take place in our towns, and if state governments and local governments are not part of the solution, I think we're just doing window dressing, and window dressing will merely make you to sweep your problems under the carpet. And so long as you are sweeping your problems under the carpet, you will always find them there early in the morning as you wake up. And I think that is what we're witnessing in Nigeria.
Well, that's if you leave the carpet. You might decide to just leave it there for some reasons of yours. Dr. Olawale Alba, Chairman, Board of Trustees, Society for Peace and Peace Studies and Practice. Thank you very much for joining our conversation this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank our guest in the Abuja studio, Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of operation, Sotoye Leroy Wakama. Thank you very much for joining our conversation this morning. Also, Dr. Samuel Negudu, National Coordinator, National Agricultural Foundation of Nigeria. So it's a pleasure having you in the studio.
Thank you very much.
A break beckons at this time, and we'll be right back with one or two of our companion segments.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Does your antiseptic liquid kill the germs that cause flu, diarrhea, typhoid? Dettol does. Dettol provides 10 times more protection versus leading competition. Dettol is the #1 selling antiseptic liquid, proven to protect from up to 100 illness-causing germs. So why take a risk with your loved ones?
Finally, our first gig. The whole school is here. And that's when I spotted my secret muse. Ah, that was awful. I froze. I couldn't move. Fruity Fanta.
Fanta! Great flavors. Play it better with Fanta.
Welcome back. Now it's time for our sports segment on Good Morning Nigeria. Now, action resumed on Tuesday night with the last 16 of the European Champions League, with Real Madrid beating Roma to reach the quarterfinals. And Nigeria's under-17 women coach says the Flamingos are ready for the clash with South Africa on Saturday. Here are the details of the stories.
Ahead of its crucial FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup final round four-leg qualifying match against South Africa's Botswana at the National Stadium Abuja on Saturday, the 12th of March, head coach of the Nigeria Under-17 Women National Team, Bala Niku, has assured that the Flamingos are ready for the encounter. Niku spoke after the team's training session on Monday, just as the South African Football Association announced that their contingent to Saturday's game will arrive in Abuja in the early hours on Wednesday. The Flamingos trashed Namibia's Baby Gladiators 9-0 on aggregate in the second round of the qualifying series. Nigeria has never failed to qualify for the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup since its inception in 2008.
Walcott. Oh, and polished off. A second for Giroud.
Heading to Europe, Arsenal ended a run of 5 games without a win by beating Hull City in an FA Cup fifth round replay to secure a quarter-final